Back to oil, which is skyrocketing after those drone strikes on a Saudi Aramco plant. Scott Martin is with us from the CME. Scott, you say the hysteria over the price is a little overdone now, right?
I believe so, David, for a lot of reasons. I mean, certainly when the news hits the wires like it did just over the last 24 hours, the first kind of reaction is obviously for crude to get boosted and shorts to get squeezed and so forth right behind me. But as we kind of, I guess, step back, David, and realize that, look at the progress that we've made in oil and natural gas here in the United States. Look at some of the things that Saudi Arabia has already talked about with respect to when they're going to get this under control. It looks to me like this is an isolated incident, at least so far, with respect to crude oil price and something that's going to slow down, come down, say, over the next few days.
And the rebirth of the energy industry in the United States, I mean, you cannot discount the importance of this. If any of this had happened 10, 15, 20 years ago, when we were far more dependent on what was happening in the Middle East, probably the price of oil would stay up where it is right now, right today, for weeks.
Yeah, and we'd be at the whim of whatever was going on in the Middle East, David. I mean, gosh, think about just in recent Democratic debates, these talks about the Green New Deal and moratoriums and regulations on offshore drilling. David, we talked about this on Bulls and Bears, too, last week about, no gas drilling, no fracking. Yet you've got the Permian Basin as the world's largest oil producer. We're a leader in natural gas production in the world. We don't need the Middle East anymore. This kind of stuff is an isolated incident as far as we're concerned. There's no lines at the gas station.
Yes.
Gas is not going to $5 because of this. We should be happy about where we are in our energy independence.
If we were phasing out fossil fuels, as all of the Democrat Green plans say we should, this thing would be hurting much more than it is. It's not a happy situation when oil is up 11% one day. But again, it could be a lot worse. Scott, stay right there. I want to get to the other big headline of the day. The UAW officially on strike against General Motors. Tens of thousands of plant workers walking off the job at midnight. Let's bring in Christina Partzenevelo in Arlington, Texas, one of GM's plants there. I guess about 48,000 workers on strike, right?
Yeah, there's over 4,000 workers here. There's 11 gates. You can see it's starting to get a little bit more crowded, and it is extremely hot here. I've been speaking to some of these workers. Some work on door latches. Some are drivers. Some have been here for 20, 30 years. And the major complaints, some of the demands that the union workers are asking for, of course, are fairer wages, healthcare costs not to be continued passed on to them so that they have to pay more. And then one of the third items, too, is the issue with temporary workers. I was speaking with two workers behind me that were talking about the fact that some temporary workers have been working for 6 years and are trying to get that permanent spot and can't seem to do it. They're also looking across the country to reopen those 4 idle factories. We know that GM has talked about closing down 4 manufacturers across the country. So there's a lot on the table, a lot of demands coming from the UAW. Those here, though, are going to be here no matter what for the next, until this is negotiated. They're in the process of negotiating right now. Should they stay out for at least a week, right? They're not going to be getting their full pay. They will be getting $250 U.S. From the union to cover for their time here. They're getting support. They seem energized at the moment, but there's a lot on the table given that GM has been pulling back, and we're starting to see auto sales slow down as we shift now to electric as well. So that's a heavy investment. So a lot on the table, but I met one man very optimistic because he was here back in 2007, 12 years ago when it was the last GM strike. He said he only missed 1 shift. So he's optimistic they can turn things around. Back to you guys.
Of course, that strike eventually led to a bailout, which nobody wants. Christina, thank you very much. Scott Martin is still with us. Scott, it seems like this strike comes at a rough time for both parties, right?
It does, David. I mean, tariff wars alone, and as some of the things Christina mentioned, they're going on. It's an interesting situation, David, because both sides probably have decent points, and both sides want a lot of concessions. And the reality is that both sides are going to have to give something up. I mean, we've seen that in negotiation over the years with unions and certainly teachers' unions here in the city of Chicago. I will tell you, though, it's coming at a time when the automakers are struggling. Certainly the industry is being hurt a bit. And, though, and a good point for the auto workers is that, David, we've got 7 million jobs open in this country. Now, granted, those people can't exactly fill all those jobs. Maybe they maybe not apply to some of the things these folks can do, but they do have other alternatives if they do want to walk away from their jobs if they don't get the demands they receive.
The irony here is that Donald Trump has improved the bargaining position of the UAW. The UAW has to thank Donald Trump for the job situation, which increases their power in negotiations, right?
Very true, and that's something that both sides have to keep in mind as they come to the table here. And that's probably something, David, that the irony aside is something that's probably going to help this thing resolve itself maybe sooner than later with respect to finally coming to a deal and getting back to the lines.
Scott Martin, great to see you this morning. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.